My husband's family expected me to fund his sister's luxury wedding. You have no choice, they said. I smiled and donated the money to charity. They learned the wedding was canceled, and I left with their gifts. I never thought I'd be writing this story, honestly. Like, who would believe this mess actually happened? But here we are, and I'm still kind of shaking my head at how wild this whole situation got. So grab a cold one and settle in, because this is one heck of a ride. It all started about 6 months ago when my sister-in-law announced her engagement. Now, don't get me wrong, I was genuinely happy for her. She'd been dating this guy for like 3 years, and they seemed solid. The whole family was buzzing with excitement, planning this massive celebration. But that's where things started getting weird, real quick. My husband and I had been married for about 2 years at this point. We're both pretty successful. I work in tech, he's in finance, and yeah, we're comfortable. Not like yacht money comfortable, but we do all right for ourselves. Drive decent cars, live in a nice neighborhood, that kind of thing. Nothing too flashy, just your typical young professional couple trying to build a life together. The first red flag should have been when my mother-in-law casually mentioned over Sunday dinner that they were so grateful I'd be helping with wedding expenses. I literally choked on my Bud Light. Like, excuse me? When did I sign up for that? I looked at my husband, expecting him to jump in and clarify that nobody had actually asked me anything, but he just sat there picking at his mashed potatoes. Like, suddenly they were the most interesting thing on his plate. I tried to play it cool, you know? I laughed it off and said something like, "Oh, we haven't really discussed any of that yet." But my mother-in-law just smiled that smile, you know the one, where it doesn't reach the eyes, and said, "Well, of course you'll want to help family. It's what we do." That night, I cornered my husband in our bedroom. Dude was brushing his teeth like his life depended on it, trying to avoid eye contact in the bathroom mirror. I'm standing there in my old college sweatshirt, arms crossed, waiting for an explanation. Finally, he spits out his toothpaste and goes, "Look, they just assumed, we make good money, and she's my sister. Your family, your problem." I shot back. When did I become the family ATM? He got all defensive then, talking about how family helps family, how it would mean so much to his sister, how it's just money and we can afford it. But here's the thing. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the assumption, the entitlement, the fact that nobody bothered to actually ask me. They just decided for me. Over the next few weeks, the pressure kept building. His mom would drop little comments during phone calls. His dad would make jokes about how lucky his daughter was to have such a generous sister-in-law. Even his sister got in on it, sending me Pinterest boards of wedding dresses and venues with captions like, "Thanks for making my dream wedding possible." The whole thing was making me feel sick to my stomach. Like, I'm all for helping family when they need it, but this wasn't need. This was want, pure and simple. They wanted a fancy wedding with all the bells and whistles, and they decided I was going to foot the bill. The breaking point came at a family barbecue about a month later. Picture this. Beautiful Sunday afternoon. Everyone's gathered in the backyard. Burgers on the grill, kids running around with sparklers left over from the 4th of July. Should have been a perfect day, right? Wrong. His sister corners me by the cooler where I'm grabbing another beer. She's got this folder. I kid you not, a whole folder, full of wedding stuff. Venue contracts, catering menus, photographer quotes, the works. She plops it down on the patio table next to my Corona like she's presenting a business proposal. "So I've been crunching the numbers," she says, all businesslike. "If you can cover the venue and catering, that's about $45,000. Mom and dad are handling the flowers and music, and I've got my dress covered. $45,000. Just like that. Like she was asking me to pick up a pizza. I took a long sip of my beer, buying myself some time to process what I just heard. "That's a lot of money," I said finally. She waves her hand like she's swatting away a fly. "It's nothing you can't handle. Besides, family is family. You'd want someone to do the same for you, right?" That last part really got to me, because the truth is, when my husband and I got married, we paid for our own wedding. Every single penny. We had a beautiful day, nothing too crazy, but it was ours. Nobody offered to help and we didn't ask. We figured that's what adults do, handle their own business. Update. Hey everyone, thanks for all the support so far. I'm reading every comment, and honestly, it's helping me feel less crazy about this whole situation. Some of you are asking if my husband was on board with his family's expectations. That's coming up next. And let me just say, his reaction was enlightening. Should I have seen the red flags earlier in our relationship? So there I am, staring at this folder of wedding dreams funded by my bank account, and something inside me just snapped. Not in an angry way, but more like clarity. You know when you're trying to solve a puzzle and suddenly all the pieces click into place? That's what this felt like. "I need to think about it," I told her, closing the folder and handing it back. She looked confused. "Think about what? It's family. There's nothing to think about." That phrase, "there's nothing to think about," kept echoing in my head as I walked away. Like my feelings, my financial situation, my choices didn't matter at all. I was just expected to open my wallet and smile about it. That night, I had a serious conversation with my husband. I laid it all out. How I felt ambushed, how disrespected the whole situation made me feel, how I never agreed to any of this. I expected him to have my back, to understand why I was upset. Instead, he sighed like I was being unreasonable. "It's $45,000. We make that in like 3 months. Why are you making such a big deal out of this?" "Because it's not about the money," I practically shouted. "It's about the fact that your family decided for me without even asking. It's about respect." He looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. "She's my sister. This is her dream wedding. Don't you want to be part of making that happen?" And right there, I realized we had a fundamental disconnect about what marriage means. To me, marriage means we're a team. We make decisions together, we respect each other's boundaries, we don't commit each other to things without discussion. To him, apparently, marriage meant I'd become an extension of his family's resources. I spent the next week doing some serious soul-searching. I talked to my own family, my friends, even my therapist. Everyone was pretty unanimous. This was messed up. My best friend put it perfectly. Girl, they're treating you like a walking ATM with a wedding dress. But here's where it gets interesting. During that week of thinking, I did some digging into the wedding plans. Turns out this wasn't just any wedding. This was a full-blown extravaganza. We're talking designer everything. Premium top-shelf bar, imported flowers, the works. The kind of wedding you see in magazines, not real life. And the venue? Some fancy estate about 2 hours outside the city that charges more per day than most people make in a year. The catering was from this high-end company that literally has a waiting list. This wasn't about celebrating love. This was about putting on a show. The more I learned, the more frustrated I got. If they wanted to throw a party like that, more power to them. But don't expect me to bankroll your Instagram-worthy wedding, so you can look like a Kardashian for a day. So I made a decision. A big one. I called my sister-in-law and told her I wanted to meet to discuss the wedding. She was thrilled, probably thinking I was ready to hand over my credit card. We met at this cute little cafe downtown, the kind of place that serves overpriced lattes in mason jars. She showed up with her wedding binder. Yes, she'd upgraded from a folder to a full binder, and started spreading papers across our tiny table like she was planning a military operation. "I'm so excited you're ready to move forward with this," she gushed, pulling out a timeline that looked more complicated than a NASA launch sequence. "The venue needs a deposit by Friday, so if you could write a check." "I'm not paying for your wedding," I said, cutting her off mid-sentence. The cafe got really quiet all of a sudden. Or maybe it just felt that way because she was staring at me like I'd just told her Santa wasn't real. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice getting that sharp edge that runs in their family. "I mean exactly what I said. I'm not paying $45,000 for your wedding, or any amount for that matter." She started sputtering about family obligations and how I was being selfish and how she'd already put deposits down based on my commitment. That last part really got me because I'd never committed to anything. "When exactly did I commit to paying for your wedding?" I asked. She couldn't answer that because the answer was never. Nobody had ever actually asked me. They'd just decided and expected me to go along with it. The conversation went downhill from there. She accused me of ruining her special day, of being jealous because my wedding wasn't as fancy, of not understanding what family means. I sat there sipping my overpriced latte, letting her get it all out. When she finally ran out of steam, I stood up and said, "I hope you figure out a way to have the wedding you want, but it won't be with my money." And I left. Just walked out of that cafe and got in my car and drove home. Update. Wow, you all are amazing. The comments are split between, "You go girl," and "but it's family though." For those asking what happened, next, buckle up because my husband's family's reaction was intense. And wait until you hear what I did with that $45,000 they were so sure I'd spend. Anyone else ever made a spite donation? The aftermath was swift and brutal. My phone started blowing up before I even got home. My husband, his mom, his dad, even some cousins I barely talked to. Everyone had something to say about how I was destroying the family, how I was being unreasonable, how I was hurting his sister during the most important time of her life. My husband was the worst of all. He came home that night looking like someone had died. "How could you do this to her?" he asked before he'd even taken off his jacket. "Do what? Not pay for something I never agreed to pay for?" "You know what I mean." She's devastated. Mom's crying. Dad's talking about how embarrassed he is. "And how do you think I feel?" I shot back. "Your family has been treating me like a checkbook for months, and when I finally stand up for myself, I'm the bad guy?" We had the biggest fight of our marriage that night. He kept saying I was being selfish. That family comes first. That $45,000 wasn't worth destroying relationships over. I kept saying it wasn't about the money, it was about respect. But you know what really got to me? He never once asked how I felt. Never once acknowledged that maybe, just maybe, his family had been out of line. It was all about their feelings, their disappointment, their embarrassment. That's when I started to see the bigger picture. This wasn't just about a wedding. This was about how his family saw me, not as a person with my own thoughts and feelings, and financial autonomy, but as a resource to be used when convenient. The pressure campaign intensified over the next few days. His mom called crying, saying I was breaking her daughter's heart. His dad left voicemails about family loyalty and doing the right thing. Even his sister sent me this long, emotional text about how I was her only hope for the wedding of her dreams. But the real kicker came when they decided to stage an intervention. I'm not even kidding. They literally organized a family meeting to pressure me into changing my mind. Picture this. I walk into my mother-in-law's living room thinking, we're just having a regular Sunday dinner, and the entire family is there. Aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents, the whole crew. And they're all looking at me like I'm about to be put on trial. My father-in-law cleared his throat and started this whole speech about family values and helping each other and how disappointed. They all were in my selfishness. My mother-in-law chimed in with tears about her daughter's broken dreams. Various relatives nodded along like a Greek chorus of guilt. And then came the line that changed everything. My mother-in-law looked me straight in the eyes and said, "You have no choice. Family helps family. That's just how it is. You have no choice." Those 4 words hit me like a freight train. Because they revealed exactly how this family saw me, not as an equal, not as someone deserving of respect, but as someone whose choices didn't matter. I sat there for a moment, letting the weight of that statement sink in. Then I smiled. Not a happy smile, but the kind of smile you get when you finally understand the game everyone else has been playing. You're absolutely right, I said, standing up. I don't have a choice. They all looked relieved, probably thinking they'd finally gotten through to me. I don't have a choice but to protect myself from people who think they can make financial decisions for me without my consent. The room went dead silent. I continued, my voice getting stronger with each word. I don't have a choice but to stand up for myself when I'm being treated like an ATM instead of a family member. And I don't have a choice but to show you all exactly what happens when you assume you can bully someone into giving you money. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. Right there, in front of everyone, I transferred $45,000. But not to a wedding venue or caterer. I donated it to a local charity that helps families in crisis pay for basic necessities. There, I said, showing them the confirmation screen. $45,000 spent exactly how I choose to spend it, on people who actually need help, not people who want a fancy party. You could have heard a pin drop. My sister-in-law's face went through about 5 different shades of red. My mother-in-law started hyperventilating. My husband looked like he was going to be sick. How could you do this? My sister-in-law whispered. Easy, I replied. It's my money. I can do whatever I want with it. And then I left, walked right out of that house and drove home, leaving them all to process what had just happened. The fallout was immediate and intense. My phone exploded with angry calls and texts. My husband came home hours later, absolutely furious. He screamed about how I'd humiliated his family, how I'd destroyed his sister's wedding, how I was selfish and spiteful and cruel. But here's the thing. I felt lighter than I had in months. For the first time since this whole mess started, I felt like myself again. I'd taken back control of my own life and my own money. Update. Holy moly, this post blew up. Thank you all for the gold and the incredibly supportive comments. Some of you are asking what happened to the actual wedding, and if my marriage survived this. Well, let me just say, the story gets even wilder from here. And yes, there were gifts involved. Ever had someone try to return Christmas presents out of spite? The next few days were intense. My husband wasn't speaking to me except to tell me how horrible I was. His family was calling and texting constantly, alternating between begging me to fix this and telling me I was dead to them. It was like being in the middle of a tornado made entirely of family drama. But you know what? I slept better those nights than I had in months. There's something to be said for standing up for yourself, even when everyone around you is telling you you're wrong. The wedding situation imploded pretty quickly. Without my $45,000, they couldn't afford the fancy venue or the high-end catering. My sister-in-law had to completely redesign her wedding plans, and she was not handling it well. According to my husband, she was having daily meltdowns about how I'd ruined everything. Meanwhile, I started getting some interesting phone calls. Turns out when you donate that much money to charity, they want to thank you personally. The director of the organization I donated to called to tell me how much my contribution meant and how many families it would help. They even invited me to volunteer at their next community event. It felt good. Really good. Like my money was actually making a difference instead of just funding someone's Instagram fantasy, but the real drama was yet to come. About a week after my donation, my mother-in-law showed up at my house unannounced. I was working from home, sitting at my kitchen table in my pajamas with my laptop, when I saw her car pull into our driveway. She marched up to my front door like she was leading a military charge and started pounding on it. When I opened it, she pushed past me into my living room without being invited. "We need to talk," she announced, standing in the middle of my space like she owned it. "About what?" I asked, not bothering to hide my annoyance. "About fixing this mess you've created." I almost laughed. "The mess I created? Your family decided I was going to pay for a wedding without asking me. How is that my mess?" She waved that away like it was irrelevant. "The money's already donated. Fine, but there has to be another way." "Another way for what?" "For you to help pay for the wedding." I stared at her for a long moment. "Are you serious right now?" "Completely. You could take out a loan, or use credit, cards, or ask your parents for money." The audacity was breathtaking. Even after everything that had happened, she still thought she could make financial decisions for me. "Get out," I said quietly. "Excuse me? Get out of my house. Now." She tried to argue, but I was done. I opened my front door and stood there until she left, muttering about how disrespectful I was being. That night, I told my husband about his mother's visit. Instead of being appalled by her behavior, he got defensive. "She's just trying to help find a solution," he said. "A solution that involves me going into debt for your sister's wedding? It's not that unreasonable. We could figure something out." And that's when I realized that my husband wasn't just failing to support me. He was actively supporting his family's attempts to financially manipulate me. "Are you hearing yourself right now?" I asked. "Your mother came into our home and suggested I take out loans to pay for your sister's wedding, and you think that's reasonable?" He couldn't answer that. Or maybe he could, but he knew how it would sound. That conversation was a turning point for me. I started seeing our relationship differently, started noticing things I'd overlooked before, like how he always sided with his family in disagreements, how my feelings seemed to matter less than keeping his family happy, how he'd never once defended me during this entire ordeal. Meanwhile, the wedding planning was falling apart. Without the luxury venue and high-end everything, his sister was scrambling to put together something more modest. She was not taking it well. According to family gossip, she was telling everyone who would listen that I'd destroyed her dream wedding and that she'd never forgive me. But here's where it gets really interesting. Remember how I mentioned gifts? Christmas was coming up, and despite everything that had happened, my husband insisted we still exchange gifts with his family. I thought it was weird, given that half of them weren't speaking to me, but I went along with it. I put real thought and effort into their gifts. Nice stuff too, not cheap. We're talking a cashmere scarf for his mom, a premium whiskey for his dad, a beautiful necklace for his sister. I spent probably $1,500 total, which is way more than I usually spend on Christmas gifts. The gift exchange was at his parents' house on Christmas Eve. The atmosphere was tense, to put it mildly. Everyone was being politely cold. To me, doing that thing where they talk around you without talking to you, but they took my gifts. Oh, they took them all right. His mom even made a show of trying on the scarf and saying how nice it was. His sister actually smiled when she opened the necklace. I thought maybe, just maybe, we were starting to move past all the wedding drama. I was wrong. 2 days after Christmas, my sister-in-law showed up at my door with a bag full of boxes. The gifts I'd given the family, all of them. We're returning these, she announced, shoving the bag at me. Why? Because we don't want anything from someone who destroyed my wedding. I looked at the bag of returned gifts, then back at her face. She looked pleased with herself, like she'd just delivered the ultimate insult. Okay, I said, taking the bag. She seemed surprised by my calm reaction. I think she was expecting me to get upset or beg her to keep them. Instead, I smiled and said, "Thanks for bringing them back. I'll return them to the stores and get my money back." Her smug expression faltered a little. Or maybe I'll donate the refund money to charity too. You know, spread some more Christmas cheer to people who actually need it. Now she looked mad. You're unbelievable, she said. I'm unbelievable. You're the one returning Christmas gifts like a petulant child because I wouldn't pay for your wedding. She stormed off without another word. That night, I sat in my living room looking at the bag of returned gifts and had an epiphany. This wasn't about money anymore. This wasn't even about the wedding. This was about control. His family had decided they could control me, manipulate me, pressure me into doing what they wanted. And when I refused to be controlled, they lashed out like toddlers having a tantrum. But here's the thing about trying to hurt someone who's already decided to protect themselves. It doesn't work. I returned all the gifts the next day and donated the refund money to the same charity. Another $1,200 to help families in need. And you know what? It felt amazing. Over the next few weeks, I started making some big decisions about my life. I realized that I couldn't stay married to someone who would consistently choose his family's wants over my basic right to make my own financial decisions. Someone who would watch his family treat me terribly and not only refuse to defend me, but actually support their behavior. The final straw came when my husband suggested we could compromise by paying for half the wedding. It's only $22,000, he said, like that made it reasonable. It's not about the amount, I said for what felt like the millionth time. It's about the principle. What principle is worth destroying our marriage over? The principle that I get to make decisions about my own money. The principle that my feelings matter. The principle that I deserve a husband who has my back instead of throwing me under the bus to keep his family happy. He looked genuinely confused, like he couldn't understand why those things mattered to me. That's when I knew our marriage was over. I filed for divorce 2 weeks later. My husband was shocked, his family was outraged, and honestly, I was relieved. For the first time in months, I felt free. The divorce was messy, as divorces tend to be. His family tried every manipulation tactic in the book: guilt, anger, bargaining, the works. They even had his sister call me crying, begging me not to break up the family. But I was done being manipulated. Done being treated like my only value was in my bank account. Done being married to someone who saw me as an extension of his family, instead of his partner. The best part? Because we'd kept our finances mostly separate, and I'd been careful about protecting my assets, I walked away with everything I'd brought into the marriage, including the money I would have theoretically spent on that ridiculous wedding. 6 months later, I was living in a new apartment, loving my job, and volunteering regularly with the charity I'd donated to. I even started dating again, a guy I met at a volunteer event who thinks it's awesome that I stood up for myself instead of thinking I was selfish for not funding someone else's party. As for my ex-husband's family, last I heard, his sister did eventually have her wedding. A much smaller, more modest affair at a local community center. By all accounts, it was actually lovely, intimate, personal, focused on the actual marriage instead of putting on a show. Funny how that worked out. And my ex-husband? He's still single, still living with his parents, still wondering how he lost such a good wife. According to mutual friends, he tells people I left him over a little money, completely missing the point that it was never about the money. I don't miss him. I don't miss his family. I don't miss walking on eggshells or having to justify my right to make decisions about my own life. What I do have is peace, self-respect, a savings account that I control completely, and the knowledge that when push came to shove, I stood up for myself, even when everyone around me was telling me I was wrong. Sometimes people ask me if I regret donating that money instead of just saying no and keeping it. The answer is absolutely not. That donation wasn't just about helping families in need, though it did that, and I'm proud of it. It was about taking control of my own narrative. Instead of letting them make me the villain for not funding their party, I became the hero of my own story, and that $45,000, it helped dozens of families pay rent, buy groceries, and keep their utilities on during tough times. Families who actually needed help, not people who wanted to spend more on one day than most people make in a year. Looking back, that donation was the best money I ever spent, not because of the tax deduction, though that was nice, but because it represented something bigger: my refusal to be controlled, my commitment to using my resources for good, and my decision to prioritize helping people over enabling entitled behavior. These days, I'm happier than I've been in years. I've got a great relationship with someone who respects my autonomy and thinks my charity work is awesome instead of selfish. I've got a job I love, friends who support me, and a life that's entirely my own. And every time I volunteer at the charity or get an update on how my donation helped families, I'm reminded that standing up for yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary. Because if you don't value yourself enough to protect your own boundaries, who will? The moral of this story isn't don't help family or money ruins relationships. It's that respect is non-negotiable. You can't have a healthy relationship with someone who thinks they can make decisions for you, whether that's how you spend your money, your time, or your life. And sometimes the best way to show people that you deserve respect is to respect yourself enough to walk away when they won't give it to you. So to anyone out there dealing with family members or partners who think they can pressure you into paying for things you never agreed to fund, remember that no is a complete sentence. You don't owe anyone an explanation for how you spend your own money. You don't owe anyone access to your bank account just because you're related or married. You deserve better than that. We all do. And if standing up for yourself makes you the villain in someone else's story, maybe it's time to write your own story instead.